It is a sequence we all know by heart. A teenage couple drives out to a secluded dirt road. The radio plays softly. Outside, the woods are dead silent. And then, somewhere in that darkness, a masked killer begins watching them. He creeps up to the car, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. These tropes define the modern horror film, yet the foundation for this specific brand of terror was laid in 1946 by a real, unidentified serial killer. In the spring of 1946, the United States was transitioning into an era of post-war relief. After years of global conflict, communities were finally looking forward to a predictable, quiet future. Texarkana, a quiet twin city straddling the border of Texas and Arkansas, seemed like the ideal setting for this new peace. It was a place where neighbors knew each other, and locking your front door at night was considered entirely unnecessary. That sense of safety was upended when a predator began stalking the dirt roads outside of town. He targeted young couples parking in secluded areas, known as lovers' lanes, wearing a crude disguise, a white cloth sack pulled over his head, with 2 uneven holes cut out for the eyes. The presence of this faceless attacker forced a sudden, severe paranoia onto the community. Residents bought out every padlock and double-barreled shotgun in the county, and as the sun went down, the streets emptied. Texarkana had become the town that dreaded sundown. The violence began on a freezing February night. Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked on Richmond Road when a man blinded them with a flashlight and leveled a pistol. He beat Jimmy with the gun's butt before assaulting Mary Jean. Though traumatized, both survived. 1 month later, the stakes changed. A passing worker found Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore inside a parked car on Robeson Road. Both had been shot in the back of the head at close range. This time, the killer left no witnesses. By mid-April, he struck again, targeting 2 teenagers returning from a school dance. Paul Martin was found shot 4 times, while his date, Betty Jo Booker, was found tied to a tree 2 miles away. The killer notably took her gold saxophone with him as a trophy. On May 3rd, the predator moved from isolated roads to a residential home. He fired 2 shots through a kitchen window, murdering Virgil Starks in his own living room. The attack suggested the killer was comfortable navigating the town's residential outskirts and was no longer restricted to the woods. Detectives were limited by the forensic tools of 1946. While ballistics could match a bullet to a .32 caliber Colt pistol, investigators lacked the digital databases or DNA technology to turn that physical evidence into a specific name without first recovering the murder weapon. The city's geography created a unique tactical advantage for a criminal. Because Texarkana was split between Texas and Arkansas, law enforcement had to coordinate across different jurisdictions and radio frequencies. This allowed the attacker to potentially commit a crime in one state and evade capture by crossing into the other. To break the stalemate, the Texas governor deployed Captain Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez. The legendary ranger launched an aggressive strategy, placing heavily armed undercover officers in parked cars along the lovers' lanes to act as bait. Despite the massive police presence, the Phantom never approached a single decoy car. Investigators noted that by successfully avoiding these traps, the killer demonstrated an awareness of police movements and shift changes that pointed toward him being a local resident. After months of dead ends, investigators focused on UL Swinney, a career car thief with a history of violence. His wife, Peggy, provided a detailed statement to the police, linking Swinney directly to the timeline of the murders. Peggy's account included non-public information from the crime scenes, providing the investigative lead the police had been searching for. She described blood-stained clothing and identified specific locations where her husband had allegedly hidden stolen property. Detectives built their case around this testimony, but they hit a significant legal barrier. Under 1946 spousal privilege laws, Peggy could not be forced to testify against her husband. When she recanted her statement, the prosecution lost the primary evidence required for a murder conviction. With the murder case stalled, police focused on Swinney's long criminal record. He was sentenced to life in prison on habitual car theft charges, effectively removing him from the community. Following his incarceration, the attacks in Texarkana came to an end. The lack of a formal murder conviction meant that the identity of the Phantom was never officially settled in court. This ambiguity allowed the real-life attacker to transition from a police file into a recurring urban legend. Decades later, that legend became the visual foundation for the horror genre. The white sack mask worn by Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 2 is an identical match to the crude disguise from Texarkana. As this diagram shows, the historical details of the case became the core tropes of the slasher genre. The secluded lovers' lanes, the focus on teenage victims, and the silent, masked intruder are all elements lifted directly from the events of the Texarkana murders. The Phantom Killer's lasting impact is found in the multi-billion-dollar horror industry he helped inspire. While the movies offer a stylized version of the boogeyman, the original blueprint was provided by a real person who vanished into the moonlit woods of 1946.